Welcome to Markigy, the science of marketing strategy, a bi-weekly podcast where all the cool marketers discuss their favorite marketing strategies, study by study. On this show, we feature marketing risk takers who believe long-term wins for the customer equal long-term wins for the business too. How? Human-led marketing, the combination of where science, creativity, and strategy meet, or as we also like to call it, Markigy. Let's break down the marketing trends, myths, and methodologies together. I'm your host, Leanne Dowweimer. Let's go. Hi, this is Leanne Dowweimer with Markigy, and I'm joined this morning by Barron. He is a cybersecurity demand generator. Clark, tell us about yourself. How'd you end up here?
So I came into cybersecurity as an outsider. It was pretty serendipitous, actually. I had always romanticized cybersecurity, um, penetration testing, getting paid to hack into things and make your way into buildings and red team stuff. Like that's just the coolest stuff on the planet to me. And I had been in the marketing agency world for years. And after leaving that world quite disillusioned, I was like, you know what? There are actually a lot of similarities in what we do as marketers as far as like the soft skills goes and people that persuade other people to let them into their server room. It's those kind of similarities. And so I ended up applying to be a penetration tester on a red team with zero technical experience whatsoever. Um, Understandably, I was ghosted. No hard feelings. I totally get it. But I'd written this long email to the CEO of this company explaining some of these similarities, and uh, huge letter, put a lot of time into it, ghosted. So 2 years later, I get a random phone call from that CEO. He had started his own, founded his own cybersecurity awareness training startup. And he said, I've been thinking about that email for 2 years. I want you to come run my marketing department. And so I knew I was going to get in any way I could into cybersecurity. And that just happened to be it. And here
Oh,
we are.
that's such a cool story. So, I think we all want to feel like someone reads our emails and remembers it for 2 years. It didn't feel good to be ghosted, but what a great outcome.
It was
Um,
wild. Yeah.
when you went from like a marketing agency, which I don't want to call all agencies the same because they're not, but there's the very typical marketing funnel and things that happen. How did that fit in when you moved over to cybersecurity? Did you like how did that match?
Not at all. It
Okay.
yeah, it didn't match at all. Being on the agency side, it's just a matter of being at a different kind of agency. This is more of a creative marketing agency. And so I was working with everyone from Exxon to Jimmy Buffett to everything in between you could think of, like global brands or the mom and pop barbecue stand in Birmingham, Alabama. Who knows? Um, yeah, it was really different, coming from agency into um, basically anything else because agencies are a beast of their own. But uh, the funnel itself is one of those things that I have a really strong love hate relationship with.
Yeah, I think we all feel that way at some point. Where we're like, well, there's the whole is it a funnel? Is it a flywheel? Like what
Right.
is it? It could be a dinosaur. We don't know. Um
Yeah. Well, funny you should say that. Dinosaur. I think we might be able to track where it's heading that way. Buyers don't want their hands held. They want to do what they want to do. And it's perfectly understandable because, everybody knows the majority of basically all my experience is in B2B. And so eh, we too often get caught up in the personas of it all, right? They're still human beings. At
yeah.
the end of the day, they still want to lay on the couch and watch Bob's Burgers and thumb through TikTok. Like that's, that's a thing. There's so many marketers out there that have their personas, have their ICPs, and you're like, who fits into this box? And so eh, the entire structure of their funnel is predicated on that, and then going after them wherever they are perceived to be. Well, a few of them might, sure. Do you know how many C-level executives are not on LinkedIn?
Lot. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things in our first conversation where we were the most aligned. We're like, "Oh my god, I think that way too." Is that people are people. And if you have a group of 10 people, how is a business buying committee really that different than the purchase decisions for like a new car, right? You think that, after a certain age or a certain stage of life, there's usually more than one person involved in the decision making process. So, I think that, is it 10 people that chooses whether someone gets an SUV or a sedan or blah? No, well, maybe not that many people. But I don't really think that all 10 people in a buying committee are getting 10 opinions that are equally weighted, that are, equally. There's always somebody of the pack that is like leading the cause, that is leading the
Right.
decision making, that is saying like, hey, like there's the mediator, the translator, they're managing it all. Um,
Right.
so
We
go
also
ahead.
have to consider that, we talk about people as in this context, like your average consumer and those buying habits versus a B2B buyer. We also have to consider that if you're just a regular consumer, IRL in real life, then you want the thing. You actively think about it often, whatever, if it is that SUV or whatever. How many people within your ICP, your buyer community, whatever, how many of those people just turn the lights off and go home, right? They flip the switch, their brains off. They're not going to think about it again. They're going to go back to being the person watching Bob's Burgers on the couch. It's one of they go back to being a human, not a persona. And so, when we think about demand gen as a whole, and so many eggs are put into the LinkedIn basket, or if you're trying to do the demand capture and with whatever, you're not only competing with your competitors, you're competing with TikTok, crazy cat videos, the hot wings eating show on YouTube. Like you're creating for you're competing for attention. And what a lot of B2B marketers don't understand is that attention is earned, and you have to have some sort of value that keeps you top of mind with that audience, because there's an excellent chance that at the end of the day, they don't think about you at all. While you're up until midnight worrying about what those people are doing, whether they're seeing your ads, what can you do in your messaging? Could you change this color, this word, the position of this button on this landing page? They don't think about you ever.
No, no. If you miss a day posting on LinkedIn, do they wonder where you are? No, they don't.
Right. And so tying this all back to the funnel, in my world, we think the end all be all is the CISO, the chief information security officer. Well, that's one person. And there might be a buying committee, but what usually ends up happening is, for example, the practitioners that would be using your cybersecurity tool, they're not marketed to. Why? Well, a lot of people think that they don't have to, because those practitioners don't write a check, right? They're not going to add qualified pipeline, those specific individuals. If we're running a hardcore ADM play, then we might lump them in together, sure. But, you know, eh, if you're putting all your eggs in one basket and neglecting, who, the group of people that could actually be using something, then you've got one single funnel that you're trying to drag a person through that does not have time, doesn't really want to talk to you, is very, very once in a blue moon in market for what you do, if ever. And so it's kind of like the old, hey, you should diversify your portfolio. It's the same way. Like we can cast a wide net without casting too wide of a net, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about kind of like inverting the funnel, like as far as what the net that we're casting. One thing that came to mind as you were speaking was like the whole is this a vitamin or a painkiller, kind of
Mm,
cliche question. And is it really the CSO that feels the headache of using it every single day, or is it the person that reports to the CSO? Right? Like
right,
who's the person whose pain you're actually killing? Who's the person who's gonna actually have that emotional connection or need, or, what we're trying to inspire in our marketing? Is
right,
is it is it really the person in the C-suite, or is it the person who has to make a report every month and list all the, for example, all the security breaches or attacks or this or that?
right,
Who is the person in compliance perhaps that has to make sure that
sure,
PII wasn't late?
right.
Um,
So it's a really weird situation because if you separate those two groups, like for example, the DevSecOps team, right, trying to go on a wild goose chase, chasing down vulnerabilities that aren't even exploitable, for example, that you know how much time is wasted. Just like, well, we'll start patching stuff, you know. Um, that's a completely different pain point within that entire account than what it would be with a CISO, for example, if there's $100 million breach, right?
right. I
And so you gotta.
define that kind of attack. Define the acronym you just said.
I'm sorry.
CISO? Was it what kind of attack?
Oh no, I was referring to the C-suite, like
The C-suite. Okay, okay, sorry.
right,
I was like,
the
I haven't heard this.
CISO, yeah.
I'm like, I know what a DDoS attack is, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's the
Sorry.
CISO attack, and that's what we as marketers do. Yeah, just trying to get people to click on something, right? Between cool, between marketing and cybersecurity, can we please get some more acronyms? You know,
I just wanted to find them so I know what they are.
right? But you know, the problems that are going to attract a CISO to a tool, what's going to put him in market or her in market is going to be completely different than what an entire team would be paying attention to. It's different pain points, and when you do things like neglect an entire team of practitioners, um, you miss all those pain points. You're missing opportunities left and right because uh, one, they don't know you exist. They don't know that uh, you could actually provide a substantial lift, and it's just like I mentioned, it's an entire funnel that, you know, should exist, but it doesn't too often. And so it's, it's one of those things where we don't really know what to do with the funnel as a whole. Should we get rid of it? Should we just start focusing on messaging for individual groups of people like we did? Should we make another funnel? It's a tricky place to be in right now. But it's
Yeah.
really fun. It's really fun to navigate.
uh, it can be really fun, or it can be a lot of busy work. What so when we talk about kind of like flipping the funnel, or taking a wider net and looking at how the typical funnels fail to create demand in this sense, what are some risks of the way that you approach it? Like, what would be something where you're like, oh man, I this was something I was worried about might happen, and thankfully I did this so that it wouldn't, kind of thing.
Yeah. So the one thing that I would actually be worried about the most that might fly under the radar are the internal issues that would arise. That comes from the KPIs being different for those two different motions, right? Those two different audiences. Um, there is a customer journey that, at the end of the day, we would like certain individuals to go down, certain groups of people to go down, um, but we can't force them down it. And so we have to measure them differently. And we have to take things into consideration like, yeah, a CISO does actually hold the coin purse, right? Has different pain points, et cetera. So it's an entirely different campaign. It's basically its own motion, right?
Yeah. And I would assume, but we want to question all assumptions, that the type of moves that you would make to be inclusive of the lower level, ICs, individual contributors, would not alienate or somehow detract from or worse cannibalize the motions to attract the C-suite.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of have to do one with the other. I mean, the overarching goal of making these kind of plays is basically the same concept as let's say I make toys. What am I going to do if I want to sell my toy? Am I going to immediately ask the parents for money? No, I'm going to put the toy in the kid's hands and watch what happens. I want to create those internal evangelists that will do my job for me. They'll do the sales for me, you know? That's what we want. And attacking it from that angle, it's it's really awesome to see. And going back to some of the risky things is if you're making those kind of plays, have a very clear discussion up front that we're going to be measuring this way. We're going to be measuring this way. They're going to look very different. One's going to be based off of engagement. We might have for the practitioner's motion, we might have an interactive demo on a landing page just for them, just so they can go use it. Because we know that if we try to put a bunch of gates in front of it, if we try to ask for a bunch of information, one, practitioners, they're going to put whatever they can in that box to just break that gate. If not just break the gate because they're world-class experts at doing exactly that. Um, but yeah, we're going to just provide as much value. We're going to be proud of our product. We're going to get it in their hands and watch the magic happen. Whereas, let's test a different experience for the C-suite where we can compromise. We can keep a customer journey that goes through a CTA that's book a demo or contact sales. Let's just see what happens. And obviously, with one, you're going to be measuring more traditional bottom of funnel stuff. And then the other one's going to be more top and mid funnel. There are tools right now where you can have these interactive demos on your page. Uh, I'm a huge fan of Nevada. You can track all sorts of analytics through how far down the demo someone gets. You can get really good insight without requiring people to identify. There's still a lot of stuff to report on. And I think if you approach it from that angle, you're going to mitigate a lot of risk up front because I don't think that just putting two separate motions into action is really any different than just having a couple different campaigns running. We know how to report on those things. But if you're comparing it to something very, very differently that's all working together, then you got to have that conversation up front because misalignment internally with motions this large, that'll cause some problems.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, because I'm looking at my notes from our original conversation. I love that you mentioned the demo thing because that was something I really wanted to hear you talk about. Was from the summary of it was that on the page was that instead of gating the demo because the way that you explained it to me was that you wanted to approach the relationship in a more authentic way. And you knew that their bullshit meter was like super duper high. And you mentioned that, and I'll let you talk on this, but how are you protective of the products? Because what there was like one flaw that might come up with doing like evergreen or you know, the demo the way that you were talking about.
Yeah, this is one of those ways of old, particularly in um, SaaS, in cybersecurity. Everybody's really protective of their product. And the way I approach that conversation is imagine walking into any store or Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever, and you having to give your personal contact information or better yet, your work email. Not, I'm going to require a work email before you're allowed to see or get anything. Why are we doing that? How much sense does that make? How much confidence do we have in our product? Are we that afraid? Are we that afraid that our brand isn't good enough, that our product isn't good enough, that we need to sit someone on a call and hold their hand the entire time? Because everyone out there has data suggesting that buyers hate that. Absolutely abhor it.
I mean, I don't know about what the data is, but I know that I for sure gets I just zone out because it's just classical pedagogy. It's how you teach people. People don't learn very well by just watching someone else click around on a screen. They need to have the experiential learning of multiple ways of interacting with a skill that they're trying to gain. So they need to hear it said, which is great for the demo, but they also need to be able to like have that kinesthetic, I moved this and I did this and
Like
I clicked here. And their brain needs to create the neural pathways for themselves.
100% correct.
Um,
Now think about a cybersecurity audience. Practitioners. They will know more about your product just by clicking around in about 7 seconds than a lot of your sales folks. Like they know what they're doing. You just have faith. If you have a good product, build a good brand.
I almost it brings to mind like a picture of this is probably the second time I've referenced the Matrix today. But like when like he could all of a sudden see the code behind people and it's like that's almost kind of like, on a delayed impact of how probably the practitioners, the cybersecurity practitioners are like, look, I know that this says this. I just need to see if you added this line so that it's actually secure. Or I need to see if you have it set up like this to meet my needs. They have very specific needs.
You're
Um,
exactly correct, and that's actually where a lot of deals go south. To be honest with you, I've seen it happen before where you gotta check that box, close walls, because you get in one of those demos through one of the more traditional bottom of funnel uh, motions, and someone starts with the really really hard hitting questions, and if the person that's giving that demo isn't batting 1,000 and just A+ing the entire thing, that that hurts your brain. It doesn't just lose you the deal; it hurts your brain because that's a very tight knit group that basically everybody knows everybody, kind of small town. And once you're burned, you're burned. Like to the point where you might have hit your marketing goals, but how much of your TAM did you actually burn on the way there?
yeah. I mean, and that comes back to, some like myths and mistakes. I feel like we just uncovered a lot of them. Um, and, like thinking about long term instead of short term is there is that delicate balance between meeting the short term needs um and the long term value. And I know we don't want to say that they're ICPs, but it feels like you just have to know your ICPs. You got to know your people and what it is they actually value instead of saying, "Oh, this is Tech Tom, and Tech Tom likes webinars." Well, no, Tech Tom actually doesn't like webinars. Um,
Right. And I have seen spreadsheets that had exactly that kind of language on it. And I mean, everybody has when you do your, here's your Maverick, here's your, but, those type of deals, you give them names. They're going, I thought, I thought they were just people. Like, we have to rely on our marketers to build a brand that can make them aware and then trust that we can get them to engage with us. And then that's where the relationship actually begins. Because if you think you know your audience, your actual buyers that can write you a check based on just something you made up, I got news for you. You're gonna have a bad day.
This is a little bit like off track from our prompts, but you told me a story about how you blended in with a group of your potential customers, and that was one way that you participated in the same types of forums that they participate in, and that's one way that you were able to gather like that front line. I don't know what to call it, but the team talk, the behind
On
the
the
scenes,
inside, sure.
yeah, inside information. Um, and and I thought that that was really a great way to get to know them instead of just making assumptions.
Yeah, I ooh, yeah, here we go.
We're working
Um,
on phrasing though. We're phrasing this as participating.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, it's one of those things that scratched a part of my brain that I just can't let go. And that is the darkest of funnels. Just finding out where everyone hangs out and just seeing if you can blend in, seeing how long you can last. It's I, as a marketer, that's what I look for. That's the holy grail, right? Is just hearing it straight out of their mouths. Like, candidly, no one's around. They're, amongst peers, friends that they've been in touch with for decades. What do they say about your product behind your back? What do they really think? You might have some, you hear about some bad reviews or whatever, but all that's front facing, Um, so yeah, I did manage to get into a closed group, a professional network, and tactics to get in. Probably won't dive into that. Um, but
We're gonna pretend that they were on the up and up and that you were invited. Um,
for yeah, for sure.
yeah.
But the takeaway here is put forth any motion that you can afford to make that happen, because when you're relying on things like your paid search attribution and everyone thinks that, like, oh, let's throw more money at Google ads, like, no, there is a seedy underbelly of the where everybody hangs out around the water cooler. That's where they found out about you initially. And if you can do anything you can to get there, the gates just open. There are your actual pain points. There are your real insights into not only the perception of your product, technically speaking, um, but the perception of your brand and all of your competitors. And I've seen some pretty brutal things in those communities. Nothing crazy like as one might assume, but the way that brands and certain products were just being absolutely ripped to shreds. And for every one uh, sentence that I saw that was talking badly about someone's product, there were 19 million that were talking about the way they marketed that product. It was all about the marketing. It was all about the uh, over promising and under delivering. It was just straight up lying in sales calls about what their product does. And they knew for a fact going in, it didn't. They just wanted to find out if you'll sit here and say that to my face, because I know it doesn't do what you think it does. And it was eye opening. It was absolutely eye-opening. And if you've got a marketer on your team that is just completely unhinged and crazy enough to try to get those kind of insights, do it, because it's insanely difficult and might be one of the most valuable pieces of research you can ever do, because I guarantee you, you will never find that kind of stuff off any intent data, off of Zoom info, off of someone's LinkedIn post. It's never, ever going to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was doing social media for one organization and I set up this is kind of the entry level way of doing what you're saying. Um and I set up like alerts through Talkwalker, free alerts. And I would see things that were posted all across the internet about that brand. And I would see, if you really want to know what people think about you, your products, what the keyboard warriors are gonna say mean things about you, go to Reddit. Go to Reddit. Go see what people who are anonymous, who are there to dogpile on each other's
Right.
comments. Um, Go there if you really want to see what you need to fix
Right.
and take it seriously. And you, it's funny because you know I I know that there's so many sales methodology. Oh yeah, you should Sandler, you should Bant, you should Medpic, you should this.
Sure.
I don't know what half of these things mean. Like on like I couldn't like write out the framework, but I can tell you that if you execute any one of those things in a way that makes me feel sold to, or tips off my bullshit radar,
Right.
or is
Nailed it.
anything but authentic, I'm not an idiot, and I don't like being patronized or condescended to.
Yeah.
Um, and
And,
I
and
and I'll tell
I
everybody
should
about
say
it.
that, well, yeah, like I should say that, like, in the group that I was in, like, I kind of got invited, but like a lot of folks didn't know. Like, it was more like to get in there and just look and just observe.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely not one of those like uh infiltrate and influence, right?
Right,
Like
right.
sounds like a pretty cool operation, but like it, it wasn't the first time that it happened where uh, one of my friends on the other side of the fence was like, "Hey, you got to see this."
Mhm.
It's wild, and Reddit is absolutely another one of those things, and anybody can go there and just watch the world burn when it comes to um, sure, cybersecurity folks, but also like all different industries just complaining about the way that marketing is done. And that's what irks me, is because we don't take feedback like that to heart. And further, we don't consider that someone may have had that opinion of what we were doing before we even started to do it. I think that you have to be very, very thorough in evaluating you, like your personal or your team's personal level of self awareness. And what would I do if I saw this? And put yourself outside. Marketers are the easiest people to market to on the planet, because we will click on absolutely everything. We will light up the switchboard and like Christmas morning. Um, don't know if that signals intent. Who knows? But everybody's gonna participate with everybody's everything. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's like you. Like you, all of us as marketers. And if you can put yourself in anyone else's shoes outside of the LinkedIn marketing echo chamber, just run down that path as fast as you can, because that's where your audience actually is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, you should take things with a grain of salt, and there's always outliers or anomalies. But at the end of the day, if you take a systems approach to fix those things and you say, you know what, if we have this thing that we've seen up here, here, and here, and or this one person has this experience. It can be repeated. First you see if it's a repeatable
Sure.
mistake. Um, and then you got to look at the system that enabled it to happen. Is the premise flawed? And if you don't fix the foundation, you're Sisyphus pushing a boulder up the hill. Like you gotta fix
Like,
the foundational things in order for things to work. And sometimes there's hard parts and there's uncomfortable truths, or there's just pushback and it is what it is. Um, but the more that you can, I firmly believe, the more that you can be transparent and you say what you are and what your flaws are, people are willing to deal with a lot.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not an automatic no, and, okay, for what this is why we keep the bookshelf behind us. If you wanna hear more about this, I'm gonna pitch somebody else's book, but this is a really good book to,
Oh,
talk, like, that says, "Yeah, well, look at the flaws that this company has," and people pay
right.
premium stuff for it. So before we go too far down that tangent, expanding the funnel and kind of, like, flipping it and things like that, is there, um, a person or a time when what you're kind of saying to do is the wrong fit? Is this something that people outside of cybersecurity should be doing? Is this, what are who is this good for and who is it not good for?
What everyone should be doing is doing absolutely anything it takes to figure out how your audience thinks. Not only what they think about, not what they think about you, how they think, where they're at. And the only way you're going to do that is to talk to them. I've seen a lot of situations where marketers like don't have access to your own customers. It's wild to me. How are we going to learn? How are we going to iterate and adapt? I fail fast, whatever you want to call it. Um, I think that's expense number zero on my list of things to do is put forth a program to where all marketers on your team have full access to all the customer data. There, a way to incentivize customers to give us feedback. Whether it be a coffee hour or lunch and learns or whatever, or just same type of like referral thing. Just give them value. Give them. You already have their account. You already have their contract. Like, give them whatever you can to just get them to give you insights. Just ask them questions like, why did you buy our thing? And I don't mean, why did your company buy our thing? Why did you buy our thing? What was it? And just listen. A lot of marketers don't realize that if you just talk to your customers, they will tell you exactly how to do your job and be really, really good at it. You just got to shut up and listen.
That's the hardest part, shutting up. You just they absolutely wanna tell you. They're waiting for somebody to Um, they've got opinions, and it's great when you are able to, and there's plenty of free, cheap, easy ways to have conversations.
If on the backside of that, you could also apply that to closed lost, right?
Absolutely.
You know, I,
1000%.
I think that we do that a lot more often. Like you know, especially folks in sales, like, why did I lose that? Like, I've seen AEs and reps just obsess over it, and I get it. Like, directly tied with their income. Like, I mean, I'm measured on qualified pipeline and velocity. Like, mine kind of is too sometimes. Um, so I get it, but create an environment where you're not sending emails, tracking down, and you're still continuing to operate as a marketer or as a salesperson, chasing someone down the road that's running away from you as fast as possible. Approach that conversation like a human being, because you're a human being wanting to talk to another human being. You're not a salesperson chasing a persona down the road, right?
I can tell you Like that I feel like when I was working for myself and I would be the salesperson, I'd be like pitching this or even I'm so ashamed. I did this to somebody that I wanted to have on my podcast. And I could tell you the exact moment where it messed up because I could tell by their demeanor or their face or, I said the wrong thing and it was too late. And when they feel sold to is almost always going to be that moment where you just see them glaze over. Or you use phrasing that is just unknown to them. It is just not how they think, speak, whatever. And getting really good at understanding that moment and being able to articulate what it is you did wrong and not do it again. Huge, huge.
And that just reinforces the notion that you have to prioritize your audience at scale. Because just what you mentioned, that particular threshold is going to be different for every single person
Yep.
that your teams come in contact. And so you have to dive head first as hard as you can into that wide net again and see how many you can catch because you have to have as many data points as humanly possible. It's a lot to sort through. It's a lot. If you're a marketer that has spent a half or whole day or 4 years of your life listening to gong calls, for example, cool. So glad that got better and got to the point of those calls. But it's the same type of deal. You really have to consider the individual. That's what it all comes back to. It comes back to the individual because there are way too many variables there to just assume that you know anything about them. You're trying to put them into a box because you're incentivized to. You're incentivized to put everybody in a box because you want them to be dumped out of that box down that funnel. And if you have a bunch of strays running around, how are you going to get them in the funnel?
How are you going to segment them? How are you
Exactly.
going to do it?
Exactly.
Uh, Earlier, I said something to you, and I just want to repeat it like on the podcast. Is that the best skill that you can have is the questions you ask. And you know, I think that the questions that we as marketers ask when we have these opportunities changes everything. And I've met some amazing some people that are just so good at the questions that they asked other. And if you can make that your superpower, go. Like that's the direction I would tell somebody to go to. If I
Yeah.
could meet like an 18-year-old person looking for my advice, I'd be like, get good at asking questions. Um and one of my questions, such a cheesy segue. Uh what do you think the future of marketing is? Do you think that it's gonna enable us to be human centric? Do you think that where it's going is where it should be going?
Is it going to enable us to be human centric? We're already enabled to be human centric. We just refuse to do it. And that's the problem. The future of marketing is brand, particularly in B2B, because B2B buyers have had about a gut full of our current customer journey and where we want to hold their hand constantly. At the end of the day, they're still a person and they buy things like a person. And we can't interrupt that. We can't tell them where to go or what to do. We can incentivize it. We can suggest it. We can present what we have to say to the world and hope that they do. And that's the name of the game. And the people that are better at doing that succeed more. But you're never going to have a long-term sustainable growth model if you're not paying attention to the individual. Because when you scrape 10,000 leads off of Zoom info and dump them into the funnel, what do those numbers look like? I don't think anybody's been too happy at what those numbers look like. in quite some time. And then what does that do? That leads to your sales team hating you because they're garbage leads. And it, creates all this internal conflict and everything goes to shit after that. And so approaching it from a brand perspective, let your buyer know, whether they realize it or not, that you actually respect them. You understand how they're choosing or not choosing to engage with the things that they engage with, just like they do as a normal consumer. You know, uh, in cybersecurity, for example, sales cycles are regularly really, really long. People are very rarely in market. And so that means that they're not ready really to engage with anything. They might click on a page. Sure, they might give you that email address to get your white paper or whatever. And if they're feeling crazy, they might even interact with some content syndication. Who knows? But that's not indicative of intent at all, really. And we're finding that out more and more. Um, and so I think where not only it's going, but where it absolutely must go on our side, what we absolutely must start doing is loading top of funnel content, top of funnel value. It's about brand awareness and being top of mind when they're in market. Because a lot of the times you have no clue when that window is going to open and for how long. And I guarantee you that in my industry, for example, if you're not already on their radar, you have lost. When that switch flips and they are in market, if you're not already in their brain, you're out. You will never be considered in the first place. And so we're all focused on traditional bottom of funnel metrics because they, make us think that something's happening. They look good on a presentation deck, right? But how many dollars came from that? You know, the sales cycles being so long, you're actually just guessing at that point.
I mean, I love analytics and I, spend a lot of time looking at the data. I feel like so much of it is just an arbitrary guess because we have to have something to guess with. We feel like we have to call it something so that we can try to
That is what I have
read
often
tea leaves.
referred to as the elephant in the room, the big elephant in the room that no one talks about especially in these companies with ginormous sales cycles. How can you really attribute like this download from like 6 months ago to that dollar there? Really? You sure about that? And what happened in between that time? Like it's wild the things we report on. And sure, we have to do it. We understand why we do it. And we are genuinely trying to get the most insight we possibly can out of it. But is it really a one-to-one as far as our relationship with our audience? Is it a clear picture of what it actually is as opposed to what we think it is that just kind of makes us look good? I don't know.
Well, I have to say that at least, um, as far as my guess, we all kind of agree that there is, not to sound like we're drinking the Chris Walker Kool-Aid, but like, we all agree that there is the darkest of dark funnels. There is so much that, we'll just never know. Um, and that we're doing our best. I see that we've gone for quite a while. I wanted to make sure that I ask you this last question. What is a
Sure.
question that someone should ask? There's a list of questions. They come to you, they want your advice. And they probably have like all these things they ask you. What is something that they should ask you, but they don't? Like that they just miss the mark when they're coming to you for advice, or that you want them to ask you because then they'll actually get to the right thing that they're trying to do.
How do I know if I'm good at this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the time, folks get caught up in the echo chamber and the influencers, the LinkedIn influencers that, are promoting the personal brand to sell their guru stuff, you know. Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Viewers, listeners, call me a hypocrite. I'm on a podcast. I totally get it. I totally get it. I have that level of self-awareness, but I I never want to be in a position where I'm not providing value. A lot of marketers take advice and it throws off their perception of their own abilities in this industry. It's the same concept as van life on Instagram, right? Oh, look, someone's presenting just the perfect life, van, beach, sunset. But then you go to LinkedIn and go, wow, she's crushing it. And I'm not, and you have to remember that just because people have a massive following doesn't mean they're good at their job. Doesn't mean that you should take their advice. And so I think if I could come up with one question that I I wish or am looking for someone to ask me when they're asking me, like genuinely for my advice, my input, mentorship, feedback, whatever, is how do I know? How do I know? Because we're measured as teams a lot. God knows we have OKRs, KPIs, yeah, MQLs, like we've got all that, but I might not always be with this team. I want to do this for the rest of my life. How do I know that I'm good? That's the question everybody should be seeking the answer to. And everybody's going to be on their own journey to find it. It's out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great self-talk question when you're fighting imposter syndrome, right?
100%.
Like if you were giving yourself advice, what advice, what would you tell yourself? How do I know if I'm good at it? Well, you can tell yourself, if I was good at this, then I would be able to do this. And then you realize that you're doing that, or at least it helps you paint a goal to work towards. So that's a pretty clutch question. I really like that one.
We can always quantify what we do as a team. Well, if you feel your mental health kind of going off the rails into the land of imposter syndrome or worse, quantify it.
Yeah.
You know, do the same, just the same type of mindfulness, just for yourself, and become a little bit more grounded and self-aware. And there's a lot of room for reflection there. And I think if marketers will do that for themselves, they will be able to do it better for their team.
Yeah, yeah. Just don't go too off the rails. Don't go too Joshua Tree on this. And be
Right.
like, are any of us any good at anything? And it's like,
Right.
some of us, hopefully, we're working towards it. Um, awesome, awesome. Well, I appreciate you and your energy and everything you've shared with us. Um, if someone wants to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
I would say LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on there quite a bit, probably more than I should be, ClarkBarron. I'm the one with the crazy hair and the orange background. That's me. Feel free to
Awesome.
connect, reach out.
Cool, cool. And then you're also speaking at Demand by Metadata on October 25th. So people can catch that session. Not sponsored. Uh,
Not non-spawn, but
but
yeah,
legit.
really, really looking forward to that. Demand 2023 from Metadata. I'll be speaking.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And my name is Leanne with Markigy. You can also find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at info@markigy.com. Thank you.
You've been listening to Markigy, the science of marketing strategy. If any of the strategies we talked about today inspired you to learn more, try them. Remember, the perfect strategy doesn't exist, only the one that gets done. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player to make sure that you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time.